with reference to updates with USCIS, there are 9 million pending applications with USCIS. This is huge, and
Now
we know
that's
that.
news.
Yeah, and we know that from the backlog, we know that they have that many cases. It shows everywhere. Anything you send to the USCIS, there's a backlog.
Right.
So one of the big reasons for the backlog is, of course, those 485 cases. The thousands of applications that were filed and continue to be filed by Indian nationals. So mostly by Indian nationals, because those are the ones that are backlog. So from February 17th onwards of this year, USCIS started moving all those 485 employment-based 485 cases to NBC, National Benefit Center. And this was so that NBC was more able to process cases faster, and they were just stuck at Texas Service Center in Nebraska and Vermont. So in order for faster processing, everything is being moved to NBC. Many cases have been moved so far, and we're seeing some positive movement. We're seeing that GCs are being processed quicker, 485s are getting approved, so that's definitely good news. We see some forward movement in all those 485 cases. And then they've said that they're doing some technology changes so that, processing times, we all know processing times are so bad. So they're looking to improve processing times. They've embraced USDS, which is basically digitizing of records. It's a system where all the records are digitized. So they're trying to make everything digitized so that they don't have physical copies. And it saves them time to pull out the file. So every time something has to be done on the case, they have to look for the file, pull it out, mail it to the service center, which has to work on the case. And this takes, 10 days to a week to happen. And sometimes even much longer, depending on what backlogs they have. So that can be, and expense and manpower. And these cases are like 300, 500 pages, so they're big packages that you have to mail out. So that the other thing they're looking at is also the EAD forms. We all know, again, EAD processing is really backlogged. So they're looking at some kind of automatic approval so that processing times can be reduced, because it's a simple form. If you look at that, the EAD form, the I-765 is like a 3-page form, and there's just 1 page of relevant information really in there. The rest of it is just signatures, etc. So if they are able to automate that and have a machine read it for any mistakes and approve it, then it's possible to get in an approval in a few days, and that way people will not suffer and lose jobs. So they're looking at that. I hope that's really needed. So I hope they come up with some kind of automation for the EAD forms, and it's not a complicated form, so it can easily be automated, and they're aware of that. The good thing is they're looking into it. Or it's called removal right now. Now it's no longer called deportation. So all those people who do something bad are removed from the country, and that's what removal is in a nutshell. There are about 1.7 million people who are in removal proceedings right now, and
1.7 million people
who are in proceedings, meaning some stage of being removed, or whether
somewhere far along the deportation process.
Yeah, so the process could be that the removal proceeding will start and something happens which will allow the person to stay back. Maybe they have some kind of a benefit and they show that they're able to stay back in the country, and then the removal proceedings are halted. Or it could be the removal proceedings are taken all the way through and then the person is removed from the country. So in various stages, there are about 1.7 million individuals in removal proceedings. But the good news is there's a memo that is trying to reduce this backlog, and in order to do that, they're saying that cases that are can be dismissed, should be dismissed. So, not to have frivolous cases clogging up the court's time. And notice to appear. Notice to appear is when your ICE gives you notice to appear, or USCIS can give you a notice to appear in removal proceedings. That's the first step of removal proceedings. So if there's a notice to appear called an NTA, they're asking that those notice to appear be cancelled, so people don't actually have to start going to court if it's something that can be fixed. They're saying that they will no longer object to continuances, so that if the attorney should ask for a continuance, or they should ask for a complete dismissal of the case, say that a person has a pending I-130, a family-based petition, then the removal, instead of being temporarily closed, should be completely closed. That's what they're saying, so that it doesn't clog up the court's time. And that whole case then should be dealt with by USCIS instead of the court dealing with it. So there are a lot of ways of doing that, and I guess they're exploring it. USCIS has also told us that, and this is on a different note, if you're a green card holder and you've been stuck outside the country, as you know, you can't spend more than a year outside of the country and retain your green card status. But if you've been stuck for some reason due to COVID, etc., then you can still come into the country, but at the port of entry you have to show CBP as to why there was a delay, and you have to make a case for yourself, and you should be successful in that case, otherwise they'll just send you back. So make sure you get all your supporting documents. Is the consulate, and we all know again about the backlogs at the Department of State. Immigrant visas in Mumbai, as I was saying, have been saying in the past shows, there are about 500,000 immigrant visas that have not been worked on as yet. So DOS has said that they have completed working on worldwide about 450,000 cases as of May of this year. They've expanded interview waivers for first-time applicants. This is to ensure that they reduce the backlog and they have more time to move the cases along. And they've said that they've also said that because they're moving the process along, more family-based immigrant petitions are now being processed at the consulate, and therefore less numbers will be added to the employment-based cases. So we know that there have been so many numbers added to employment-based cases in the last few years since COVID, because family-based cases have basically been backlogged, and so those numbers have not been used, and therefore there have been more numbers available. All that lump sum, that carryover numbers have been available for employment based. They've also said that their main priority is the immigrant visas and the K visas, the student visas, and the H1 visas. So that's their main priority. The visitor visa category is at the bottom of the barrel. So that will take the longest, I think, to get for you. If you're looking to get a visa appointment, that might take the longest because they're focusing on all these other things first. Now, when you come into the country, you get, if you're a non-immigrant, then you get an I-94. The I-94 basically tells you, and nowadays they're not giving you those white pieces of paper stamped to your passport like they used to. It's online. So those I-94s will tell you what is your status, and it will tell you how long you're allowed to stay in the country. So that you can look at that and then either leave before that time, or you can file an extension or change to a different status. So the I-94 document is very important, and sometimes the CBP officers make a mistake with the I-94. Either they give it for a wrong classification, say you're coming on a H1, they may stamp B2 instead. Very, very important, because then your status depends on it. So it's very important to get those mistakes corrected. They can also sometimes put in a wrong name, or they could give you the I-94 for a shorter period than you should be given. So all these issues can be corrected at the airport, at CBP. You can call them. Just to show that there's a variation, just to show you the policy differences in each CBP office. For example, New York has completely different set of guidelines for how to correct your I-94. They say that you have to go online to the CBP website, and it can be done online. LAX could have different instructions, and they might want you to call the CBP office there to get it corrected, or come in person.
So is there probably a collective place where we can understand, what is the correct procedure to get them corrected, Ms. Reddy?
Yes, so if you go to the CBP website, you go to CBP in New York or wherever you are, they have their own websites, and it will generally give you instructions on how to get your I-94 corrected.
Right.
So, and because of the difference in their procedures and the different technology that they use, those things can vary. So it's always important to check on the website as to what the correct procedure is. It's not, one fits all. People asked them about it at the conference, and they said that they were trying to uniform things, that make things more uniform. But I think they also want to give the posts or the CBP officers, the individual officers, there a little bit of leverage to, make decisions on the spot. Improvements. So they are coming up with something called facial comparison. So once you look into that camera or whatever device they have, it'll allow officers to complete inspections much quicker. So apparently that, and then there's a new global entry kiosk which will allow also for faster movement of those lines. We know sometimes when we get off the plane, the lines for immigration are huge, especially if you go into the big airports. So the global entry kiosk that is deployed by LAX inspection has decreased the inspection times to as low as 10 seconds. So pretty much at the count of 10 you're done. And so then they can move people in faster. It's no longer like earlier. They're coming up with more and more technology improvements. Earlier, remember how long it used to take, sometimes half an hour to get through immigration, and now it's very, very quick, and part of the reason is because of these improvements that they're coming up with. The other issue that was discussed is remote work. So, everyone is talking about working remotely now, and how that affects, say that if you're on a H1 and you're coming into the country and you're actually going to be working from home, and the officer would ask, where is your workplace? And if you say home, how do they react to that? They have basically said that they have no problem if you work from home, but the burden of proof to show them that you have employment is on you. So you have to be able to convince the officer you have no obligation, or they have no obligation to allow you into the country. So the burden of proof to convince them that you have a bona fide job is yours. So make sure you take all the appropriate documents. There might be a change in the way we file things. They will have to be, because when the USCIS decides on a particular case, the basis for their decision is based on something called SOC codes and something called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So these SOC codes, so each occupation has a code, and each occupation will it'll say whether you need a bachelor's degree or not, or what are the requirements, what are the duties. That's mentioned in something called ONET Online. So a lot of these codes are have actually changed as of this month. And so the criteria for which job will get a H1, which job will not get a H1 has changed slightly. It is not a dramatic change, but some things have changed. So while the SOC codes now are more specific. Before, you just have one code to address like 3 or 4 different occupations or 5 or 6 different occupations. Now they specifically have new codes for new occupations that are coming up, especially in the IT space. So that's good. So we no longer have to justify or try and justify that a particular position is approvable for a H1 even though there is no code for that position, right? So we have to show them the nearest code and the nearest occupation and show how it is the same. We don't have to do that anymore because there are more codes available now for various new occupations. So that's great because it makes our life easier. We have to prove less. We just have to enter the code in the LCA and that's it. And the other thing is the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is basically online. It's a book version as well as an online version. That hasn't been changing as rapidly as the SOC, but they look at the Occupational Outlook Handbook as well. SOC has 15 different categories, while OOH has only 10, for example. So they're not keeping up with the SOC codes, but nonetheless, the occupation, for example, for programmer analyst, computer programmer, the language has changed. This is significant because previously we couldn't use that job title because as per the Occupational Outlook Handbook, employers did not always require a bachelor's degree for this position. But as per the revised language, and it's very subtle because they don't make any announcements, they don't say that they make any changes, they just sneak the language in there. So you have to really be looking at it every time.